Hey guys, welcome back. You know what this is? It's a death rocket, Chaos Dwarf Artillery. So I love this thing. They're so cute. Something about the Chaos Dwarf Artillery pieces makes them so iconic, in my opinion. And since I was a kid, I have loved these figures. And now I finally have the opportunity to do another one. So let's see. I don't know what I can finish within the span of this episode. I probably will just concentrate on this one crewman over here, the one who's reaching for the little lever to elevate the missile tube. So probably I'll get this guy done in one episode. I'll do the other crewman in another, and then after that I'll see how many episodes it takes for me to finish the main missile. Because to be fair, the main missile is quite a beast. There is a lot going on. There are a lot of directions to cover, but it should be a lot of fun to do. Anyway, so when I was a kid, yes, it's story time. When I was a lot younger, I had an army of Chaos Dwarfs, and I painted that army to the best of my ability. I never finished it, but I finished a great many units, including a Death Rocket. Then at some point, I had the bright idea of selling off the models because I wanted to fund collecting something else. And I've, I think there are very few things in my life that I've kind of regretted, but that happens to be one of them. And it's only now, many years later, that the opportunity has arisen for me to get back into putting together some of these models, and I am really jumping at the chance because even though death rockets aren't great in the game, I don't think it really matters. It's a Warhammer Chaos Dwarf with basically a ballistic missile, and come on. That's basically everything I've ever wanted in a Warhammer game. So there was this Death Rocket, and there was the Earthshaker cannon, and I loved both of them. The Death Rocket was kind of the smaller cousin. It honestly, I don't understand its rules entirely. It doesn't seem to be an improvement in any way to just a regular stone thrower. Well, okay, so here's how it works, right? You during the shooting phase, you fire it before everything else because it's a guess range weapon. Yeah, it's one of those. So it's a guess range weapon, meaning you need to sort of eyeball the distance to the target and make an estimate. Because this is a stone thrower type weapon where you had more or less an arcing kind of parabolic trajectory. You're lobbing a shell into the air for it to try to land on top of the enemy. What you want to do is you want to guess exactly the distance to the target, and then once you've guessed the distance to the target, what you do is you measure out the distance with a tape measure, and then you place the small 3-inch template on that point, right? So once that goes down, you need to then roll the artillery dice, the one that goes 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 misfire, which, yeah, it's such a big range, honestly. 2 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches, 10 inches, and misfire. And then you've got the scatter dice, which in most cases it basically has 2 hits. So 1/3 of the results on a d6. These are all 6-sided dice, by the way. But 1/3 of the results basically says that it lands exactly where you've aimed it, and then the rest of them are just arrows, and arrows indicate that the rocket has kind of flown a little awry, and more than likely it's going to land somewhere unintended, hopefully not too far from the target. The distance, of course, will be the whatever it is that you rolled on the artillery dice. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and hopefully not a misfire, which would cause the machine to malfunction spectacularly. So yeah, that's the basic premise of it. It's essentially the same as a stone thrower, albeit the template comes at +1 strength, so strength 5 instead of strength 4. The flip side is that there is no center of the template. Stone throwers would have usually a center where they doubled the strength of the hit. So that would be strength 8 vis-a-vis strength 4 for the rest of the shots. Anybody who's basically clipped by the template and for whom you can roll a 4+, those people would basically be hit by the stone thrower at strength 4, and if you are directly under the center, they are hit automatically at strength 8. So yeah, it's kind of not better than that because strength 5 is a kind of weird in-between number that wasn't very high and wasn't very low. On the flip side, you didn't have that massive strength 8 hit, the one that would cause massive damage to giant creatures. So the death rocket was kind of okay, and then if it were to misfire, it basically has a chance of like flying around in a random direction, which of course isn't great, right? Added to that, your chance of misfire and self-destruction was actually increased. A stone thrower will basically destroy itself on a 1/3 chance, but the death rocket will destroy itself on a 1 in 3 chance. That means on a 1 to 2, essentially the Chaos Dwarf has loaded it wrong. And the rocket launcher would just detonate, killing the crew instantly and wiping out the machine. Not a great use of the 75 points that this thing costs. So yeah, I don't think it was ever great. Its main benefit seems to be that it has slightly higher strength, and other than that, it was just cheaper than the Earthshaker cannon. The Earthshaker cannon was a strength 7 weapon with the same rules, but it would also sort of knock enemy units, or knock all units to the ground within 2d6 inches. So wherever you land it, you determine the point where it would land, and then all units within 2d6 of it, you would roll at the point that you hit, would basically be shaken to the ground because it fires a shell that's so large that it trembles the ground to underneath the feet of everyone nearby, and then of course you would have trouble moving because on a 1, essentially the unit may do nothing. On a 2 to 5, it's half movement speed, and on a 6, somehow the unit has managed to keep its feet and all is well. So even if you did no damage at all, the Earthshaker cannon had a chance of doing something. In fact, that something was often more valuable than the damage done by itself. Granted, it cost 140 points, so more than double that of the Death Rocket. Well, a little under double the Death Rocket's cost. But on the flip side, it was a much higher strength at 7, and it also always achieved something. Whereas the Death Rocket, if it missed, it just missed out, right? It did nothing. And I don't think that was really worth the benefit, or rather worth the added risk of exploding. So yeah, Death Rockets were I mean, they weren't better than Stone Throwers, and frankly, the downsides were quite serious. So not ideal, but there you go. I mean, to young me, I could care less, right? Because this model looks spectacular. It's an actual fucking rocket. Pardon my French. Yeah, I definitely would have included it no matter what. So yeah. Yeah, we really got to give it to the Citadel design team for coming up with something so harebrained in the first place. But yeah, it's spectacular when you think about how cool it is. Just the idea that the Chaos Dwarfs actually created something like this, and it's not like the backstory didn't build it up further, right? Because in the army book there was a story about how, or at least there is a passing mention of something called the Hammer of Hashut, which was essentially it was an ICBM. It was a Chaos Dwarf Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, and in the story, or rather in the lore, they created this thing, fired it, and unfortunately it kind of almost landed on Zana Grant itself. It almost hit the Tower of the Xanagran, which I guess would have. I mean, I don't mean to be too cruel to our 40k fans, but it would have crimson fisted. It would have crimson fisted the Chaos Dwarf faction. And then perhaps maybe like the Crimson Fists, they like Space Marines, they would be able to claw their way back to building up their chapter strength again at some point. But yeah, basically with how few Chaos Dwarves they were in the lore, that probably would have negated. They would have wiped themselves out as a faction. So even in the lore, these missiles are bad. So I don't really know why, other than rule of cool, right? Because I mean, look at these guys, right? They even the helmets are so even the helmets are so like aspirational. Like it's the helmets are desperately trying to convince you that they're worth their points. And yeah, there's something very special about that I really love. Yeah, just the utter harebrainedness, I guess, of trying to put together what is essentially a medieval missile without any real tracking system, or rather, it's kind of a rocket system, I suppose, would be more accurate, because it doesn't seem to have any guidance system. It wasn't like, yeah, it was just a rocket that sort of like screeched away as it fired, and just the description of the sounds that it would make kind of implies that it's more of a rocket. Well, it's in the name, really, isn't it? It's not even it's not even a missile. Anyway, moving along. Yeah, Death Rocket, kind of awesome, kind of terrible, but I never wanted anything else as much when I was growing up. So yeah, I had to have this thing. In fact, I had designs at one point of getting multiples of them, but of course that was not to be, unfortunately. And it's only years from then, like that, I basically found myself collecting a new Chaos Dwarf army and putting together one of these ridiculous war machines. Can't wait to use it in battle, for it to do absolutely nothing. Hopefully not blow itself up in the first turn, because that would be 7 shades of sad. Basically. But with these war machines, and how unpredictable they were, yeah, you really could never tell. Warhammer war machines, man. I mean, in that era, in 4th to 5th edition, I feel like most war machines had a pretty decent chance of like self-destruction. Like even a stone thrower, right, which essentially is a bunch of rope and maybe some kind of a torsion system, or maybe it's a trebuchet with a counterweight. Somehow, it could destroy itself in a 1 in 6 chance in the event of a misfire. So to put that in context, that's 1 in 6 to get the misfire in the first place, and then 1 in 6 again to basically make 1 in 36 chance of the machine destroying itself every time it fires. That's a high chance, right? Considering that with a chance that high, you would kind of wonder how anyone became decent at firing stone throwers in the first place, because on average you get 36 shots before you're absolutely murdered, like you're maimed by your machine. So yeah, that's crazy. And the worst part is, with death rockets, that 1 in 36 drops to 1 in 18. So one wonders how long Chaos Dwarves really live for, if a proportion of them are going into artillery school. I don't know why this is the case, but something about this makes me want to use this machine even more, because that is a fascinating failure rate, and I can't wait. Yeah. So this model, I'm bringing with me, of course, to the upcoming game that I've been building up models for. 100% I had to have a death rocket. For a moment, it looked like I would be able to afford an Earthshaker, but of course not. That's just way too expensive. 140 points in a tiny 1,000 point game is never gonna happen. So of course, I ended up going for a death rocket instead, and still kind of looking forward to the carnage that this will inevitably cause. Okay, I am going to take a hairdryer break. Give me a second. Okay, we are back after the hairdryer treatment. And you've probably been wondering why I'm applying ice yellow directly onto those arrows. I'm trying a different way of approaching the painting of these little hat decorations. To be honest, the hats on Chaos Dwarves, far and away the best thing about the faction and also the worst thing about the faction. Mostly because they essentially doubled the painting time for any Chaos Dwarf model that you had to paint. There was so much detail on the hats and that very kind of chunky stylized detail that you needed to pick up bits and pieces of using it's just long story short, it's just detail work, right? Additional detail work. All of it isn't stuff that is fast to do, and some of these like bits of detail are actually quite shallow, so in some cases it can almost feel like you're doing freehand. Although for this particular model, I don't think it's quite that bad. So maybe I'm being a little bit whiny about it. So, death rockets, yeah, the helmets on these guys are kind of reminiscent of bullets, I guess. I guess they're supposed to remind you of the way the rocket shell looks, kind of, vaguely, except a far more stylized representation of it. To be fair, the rocket looks even sillier. It looks like a flying crayon, which is kind of awesome. Love it. So yeah, doing the helmets or having a strategy to do the helmets quickly and effectively is really key to staying sane when painting Chaos Dwarves, because you're going to need to spend a lot of time on getting these just right. So you might as well have a strategy for it. So one thing I used to do was I used to sort of alternate the colors for the helmet. Like I would do the field, the sort of the background color. I would alternate that with black and red, between black and red. So some of them would have red arrows on a black backdrop. Others would have black arrows on a red backdrop. And what I found is that the red backdrop took far longer, far longer to do. Plus, it meant that you had to highlight the little black arrows, which was awful. I think for red arrows, you can just sort of get away with doing a bit of a fade on them, and that will look better. For the black ones, I think you have to do like edge highlighting on the little arrows, and that was just so much time investment. So, in the interests of saving what hair I do have left for the future, I intend to just keep these like fairly straightforward, fairly subdued. I don't want to spend too much time on getting the helmets done to a right level. So I think for the most part, I will leave them as black backgrounds and just pick out the arrows and other details in, I guess, yellow or red as the case may be. But for this particular guy, the helmet field background, when I say field, I refer to kind of like medieval shields, right? Like knights shields. The background is called a field, just like on a flag. The sort of background color of a flag is called the field. But anyway, yeah. So I think the idea is that I want to keep these fairly dark, minimal highlighting required, except where it is at its most like visible, such as such as the apex of the helmet, which I'm doing now, and I think that looks all right. And then kind of keep the rest of the model fairly straightforward, not too complicated. To be fair, there's not a lot going on these models other than just mostly red scale mail and that helmet. The bulk of the work really goes into getting the helmet looking right. So this is Nazdreg yellow. for some of his pouches. The other pouch I think I will do in blue to match his helmet, just because I've decided that I like the way the blue looks on this model, and I will try to include more of it. So already his helmet is blue, which I think is great. The rocket more than likely will be red as well. Will be blue as well. So I guarantee you I'll change my mind by the time I start painting the other crewmen, which hopefully will be in the next session. So not too long from now. But yeah. Let's jump in with blue for the other pouch that he's got on. Other than these little pouches, Chaos Dwarfs don't actually really have a lot going on. They can have shoulder pads like this guy does, but even then, they tend to be fairly large and bold and easy to pick out, so not too bad. And the next step is to come in with silver, because I do believe I want some gold details on his helmet and his funny Phantom of the Opera mask. I could never figure out what the point of these masks were, because they don't seem to do anything. Were they supposed to be like viewing glasses, meaning they had like glass for the eyes? I mean, they were a little bit small, so they don't really look like, or maybe they're like blowtorch kind of masks. Maybe that was more the deal. Certainly, yeah, the mask of a welder, for example, would provide some protection from the glare. Maybe that was the intention. Can't be sure. The other thing that's a little bit unfortunate is that this particular Chaos Dwarf doesn't have any fangs or tusks pointing upwards from his mouth, so I guess no tusks. And he doesn't even appear to have a belt designed for him. So I like this model a lot. He's a little bit smaller than most other Chaos Dwarfs, but he doesn't also have a lot of detail going on. But that said, it really goes to show what you need, what essence you can distill the design down to in order for it to still look like a Chaos Dwarf. And it turns out all you really need is a really silly hat and the red scale mail, of which the red scale mail on this model is beautifully rendered. I would argue better than most other models from the same range. So the Perrys must have done this like a Death Rocket design fairly early on in the process, because the energy that they have expended to getting the fineness of these scales, like this is crazy, right? Like, I mean, some of these scales are so insanely small. I don't know how he ever did that. Or I don't know how they ever managed to do them by hand, assuming both of the Perry twins were involved. Although, as far as I know, it's just Alan Perry. But yeah, madness. It is spectacular. Oh, actually, now that I look at it, if I'm going to be doing the ice yellow bits in, well, yellow, then perhaps I would do well to steer clear of using any gold, because I think that will just cause problems. So I'm gonna get a bit of Yandan yellow to shade down the arrow somewhat, and because the dark blue provides all the edge we need, this should be just a case of shading down the center like so, and around these studs. These studs give me nightmares, because your average Chaos Dwarf has so many of them, and each one needs to be kind of picked out and shaded and so on. Terrible. Despite this, I love these models dearly, as if they were my own children, and I can only but look away in dismay as they inevitably explode on the battlefield. Shower of molten metal and dwarf flesh. Oh, Death Rockets. Why do you exist? Why could you not have been more lethal? Young me would have had so much more fun painting this if only they would perform spectacularly during games, but alas, never the case. These things barely got a shot on target off. And it's not for want of trying, because I actually use these things because they were such nice models, and also because when you're younger and you paint these things, um, when you do actually finish it, there is a real rush of adrenaline. So when I finished one of these, I kind of used it every opportunity I could. I love the things, but they didn't love me back. Alas. Not enough prayers to hush it, I guess. Okay, so that's looking kind of nice and custardy. And this way, at least the arrows stay nice and bright, nice and vivid. And I can, without shame, I can just dab on a little bit of yellow onto that rivet, that blasted rivet, so that I don't need to treat it as a metal rivet. When I was younger, I used to waste like hours of my lifespan trying to paint essentially what is a concentric black ring with a silver dot in the center to make the rivet look, defined and clean. Insanity. Absolute waste of my youth. These days, I think I'll just keep them the same color. If it will save me a step, that just suits me just fine. I've got nothing to prove anymore. Okay. Dude, you are not drying as fast as I want you to. So, maybe what I'll do is, do I need to take another hairdryer break? Yeah, why not? Okay, cool. I'll take another hairdryer break. Back in a bit. Okay, we are back. And I'm going around now, just adding lines of blue around these arrows, because I think the silver lines kind of take away some of the definition, especially when they are bordering the yellow. So a little bit of line work really is required to make this model pop as best it can. Truth is, the ultramarine blue that I'm using for the blue areas it's so dark that it might as well be black. So I'm using it in lieu of black, and I think it will look just fine. So yeah, this was the life of someone trying to collect Chaos Dwarfs. It's just all these little details, and it's not like you couldn't just paint it black and or just do it in silver and wash it. You kind of needed to pick up all these little details, or else it wouldn't look right. But that was just iconic for the look of the miniatures, and I guess it's just part and parcel of collecting the army back in the day, as well as today. So yeah, it's how it is. Cool. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna drop a little bit of dark sand onto the skull to make it come to life a bit, hopefully, or at least to lighten the color so that it's easier to work out what you're looking at from afar. Reinforce the shape of the skull. So I think for this upcoming game, I think the point with artillery, in particular Chaos Dwarf artillery, is before you get it to the tabletop, make your peace with it, because it might be the last time you ever see it alive. Yeah, it's just, the rules are just really complicated and hard to plan on. But in theory, you just guess the distance to the largest concentration of enemy units that you can. Mutter a quick prayer and roll the artillery dice. And if something dies that's not one of your guys, that's a win. You don't really care what you take off the table. If it's not one of your models, because somehow the rule says that your rocket has decided to act with a life of its own. Your rocket has suddenly gained sentience and, has decided to go arcing off towards the nearest Chaos Dwarf unit, the nearest expensive Chaos Dwarf unit. You just lived with the consequences, because this is the bed you chose to make. Now you have to sleep in it. Yeah, you can sort of tell that, even as I talk about all the very specific emotions that collecting Chaos Dwarfs kind of like create all the specific memories that the idea of collecting Chaos Dwarfs like imprints in my mind. How it dredges up all these thoughts from that I thought were long buried. Yeah, I kind of think that going in with the right mindset is the only way you can actually play Chaos Dwarfs and kind of hope for the best. I don't know. Maybe I'm being preemptively negative. Maybe they will perform, like spectacularly on the day. Who knows? Strength 5 isn't terrible. Maybe my distance guessing abilities would, be bolstered by ample coffee and hopefully enough sleep. And maybe I might be able to guess, directly on target and sort of like wipe out the core of my opponent's army. Maybe he will be absolutely bedeviled by his own weapons of war. One can hope. But yeah, I know if I roll the dice, the artillery dice, and the first thing that I see is a misfire, yeah, I think that would trigger a very specific form of PTSD for me. And you know what? That's just fine. That's exactly why we play these games, because I think they stir very particular core memories in us. Or else they create new core memories for us, ones that we'd rather not have, but there you go. Either way, you will remember that day, and maybe that's good enough. Maybe that's all we really need, a little spike in our endorphin levels to help us remember. And maybe this thing will be bang on target. Maybe it will fry Lizardmen. Oh, I'm playing against Lizardmen, so if nothing else, at least the sound of missiles thudding into lizards. If nothing else, that thought kind of brings me joy. I really like the idea that this is some form of extreme pest kind of control. Because in Singapore, lizards are pests. We have too many of these things. Depending on where you are in the world, you probably have a very different, idea of lizards. They might even consider them pets. I know that's a big thing in the US. That's fair. In Singapore, they are absolutely pests because they just run around cracking everywhere. We don't love them all that much, unfortunately. But we tolerate them for their ability to eat bugs. And you know what? Maybe that's good enough. Okay, so a little bit more of this onto the mask. This is essentially Null Oil. And a bit of shading around the edge of his Phantom of the Opera mask. At this point, I've called it a welding mask, a Phantom of the Opera mask. Strange opera glasses. And I think this guy isn't looking too bad. I think the only other thing I really want to do is to make sure that, perhaps that blue pouch needs a little bit of love. And I want to make sure that the yellow arrows have sufficient shading. I think some of them are not fully shaded. Yeah, so this is the life of collecting Chaos Dwarfs. You really rotate the model, or painting Chaos Dwarfs rather. You really rotate the model, look and inspect every arrow to make sure that you don't miss any details on each of these. Put an extra dollop of wash around these little studs. Everything that the actual crewmen will be doing to try to artificially extend their life. as they mutter incantations of success and curse the day they chose this as their vocation, instead of being something nice and safe like a Chaos Dwarf Axeman. Marching off to war carrying a nice, solid, dependable axe that at least doesn't explode to kill you. That doesn't, require extra training to get very little in terms of results. But there you go. Such is life. A little bit more brightness on the red. And I think we are in a good place. Yeah, it's all these tiny little studs that, ugh, this certainly brings back memories. But like I said, leaving the border dark really helps. It shaves the amount of time required to touch up by half, if not more. And so long as the face is well done, to be honest, that's the most eye-catching single thing on the miniature anyway. Sorry guys, my camera cut out for a little while, so I am back. Never left the chair, I promise. So a little bit more of a dark shade around the mask interior, just to make sure that the shape is readily apparent, and just a little bit more texture, a little bit more shading in the eye sockets of the skull. And I think we are coming close to a good finish. I want to mix a little bit of yellow and London yellow and ice yellow to sort of clean up the edge of this arrow here, to make sure that it looks nice and square, and then just a little bit more silver to straighten up this zone. And I think we are in a good place, which is more than I can say for these two crewmen. I'll let you guys know how it goes. But trust me, if I was their commander, I would already be writing letters to their families. Okay, so ice yellow dots in the middle of these rivets, and you can see my pattern pending sideways rivet bump technique, kind of like that. Use the side of the brush, but use it in a way that kind of makes the most of your available depth perception. So if you're a person who needs glasses, it helps to take them off for this step, then please go ahead. Because for a lot of this sort of detail work, it's best if you do it once, rather than try to go back and forth trying to clean up all the little bits and bobs that kind of go wrong. If you can do it the first time, that's great. If you're having trouble with freehand or just really like fine detail, painting fine detail, maybe consider leaving off the coffee for that day, because it really does have an effect on your ability to steady yourself. Likewise, things like Coke and Coke Light, or Pepsi and so on, all of these beverages contain quite a bit of caffeine, and so might make the job harder than it needs to be. I am looking for a little bit of white because that skull really needs to stand out a little bit more. So straight up white, nice, punchy and bright. That's my incantation. Straight up white, nice and punchy and bright. make this skull come alive. Alright. Hey. Okay. No commentary because concentration at maximum. Putting into practice my own advice of only wanting to do this once. So it better be done one and done perfectly. Cool. And then now just a little bit of gray on the top of the shoes. Honestly, man, Chaos Dwarf shoes are such a minor part of the model that you might as well just nix a tiny dot and just treat them like a gemstone. I assume these guys spend all their time polishing their boots anyway. You know, it just feels very Chaos Dwarfy. And then a little bit of some edge lining work on the beard to just give it a bit of a direction. Just to give the eye a bit of a focus. I used to dry brush these, I no longer do that. I just draw a faint line down the center as lightly as I can so that I pick up some of the ribbing on the beard, and I find that really does the trick. Cool. I think that's just about it. Okay, there we go. Chaos Dwarf Crewman. Not too complicated. Hopefully get his friend done tomorrow, and then we'll see what we can do about the machine itself. Did spot a bit I want to touch up though. Pardon me. Couldn't quite see it. A little bit of black to trim the beard. Not literally, just the color. Don't think a Chaos Dwarf will let you trim his beard. These beards must be crazy long in real life because they're all spooled up like barbed wire. So I imagine these beards must be like miles long. Let's fix that a little bit. And yeah, cool, we're done. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, applause. One more crewman, and then I can start on the machine itself, and I'll let you know exactly how terribly this thing fares. Alright, have a good one. Cheers, take care, bye-bye.